And then wasn't there something also recently that just came out as well too, where now if you're on a main road, that you can also develop even more units? Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So one thing that recently passed is called the Major Street Study. So if you're on a major street, think, King, Queen, Eglinton, a major street like that. There's a whole map you can find online as well. You're allowed up to 60 units.
60 units?
60, yeah, 60
wow.
units. Okay, awesome. First of many.
We'll see.
It will be the first of many. We're going to have some fun with this. Michelle and Victoria, welcome. How are you guys doing?
Good.
Great.
How are you?
I am awesome. I'm just getting this thing here set up here. Of course, I forgot to do something, but who cares? We're just going to have some fun with this. So welcome. I want to dive into your story and also what you've been doing and how you helped her with this awesome property that you've picked up in the middle of converting now and almost done. But before we get into it, who's Michelle?
Michelle is a working mother of 2 young adults.
Okay.
Married, husband Kevin. He is my partner in life, and we've decided to, get into this world of real estate investment together.
Right. And Victoria, you're so busy. You got all kinds of stuff going on. We were just talking about that before we got started. But let's dive into that.
All the projects I have going
Just
on?
everything. Your life, Michelle just found out as well, too, that you're a professor.
Yes. So, my main career, I'd say, is an architect. I've been doing that for over 10 years. I'm also a professor in interior design and environmental design. So that's technically, I guess, my full-time job. But as part of being a professor, you either go in a research stream or, the practice stream. So I'd say I'm more the practice stream and kind of practicing what I do and can kind of bring that to my students. And then also investor, hoping to move more into the development space. So I try to have at least one active project of my own while I help many different clients with their projects. So definitely want to grow into that more as well.
Awesome. So Michelle, you like off-market deals.
I do.
you more than like them. You love them, right? Because that's how you started off, right, out in Peterborough.
Yeah. And, it's not something I was actively seeking out. I think the important thing when we were starting out was really just networking and having conversations with people that had access to properties. So our first deal, it was through Sean Pierce. Shout out to Sean.
Okay.
And we just met randomly and we started speaking. He said, I have an off-market deal. Do you want to come see it?
I was gonna get that down. There you go.
And that's how we picked up our first property. The second one was similar. He had something off market and he said, do you want to see it? Bought that. And then, through a lunch virtual coffee with you.
Yeah.
You were asking everybody on the call, what is your next steps? Like, what are you working on? What do you want to do? And I mentioned that we wanted to try and get into the Toronto market. And you said, hey, let's have a call after the virtual coffee. So it's kind of how Rush Home happened.
Right. And you picked that off-market deal up.
Yeah.
I know some interesting challenges that we had to go through, but we worked through it. It took a couple months to kind of figure it all out, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we first saw the property, around Halloween, I think,
somewhere around
October.
Yeah.
And we didn't actually close till April of the following year. 2023. So we had a lot of time.
Yeah, definitely. So here's what I want to do today. I want to dive into a few different things. So one, I want to dive into why Toronto and what is Bill 23, what type of property can be converted and lot size and all that. And then I also want to dive into working with the city and mistakes. I want to know about all your mistakes and what happened.
I have a lot of them.
Oh yeah, listen, we all do. And then I want to get into the final numbers, what kind of rents you're getting, your ARV, and the cost of the rentals and all that. So let's dive into why Toronto. Like, why did you decide to move out of the Peterborough market? Because we moved into the Peterborough market like around 2017. You got in, I think, during the COVID time, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
2021.
Okay.
So it really started off with I wanted to move. So we had always lived in Thornhill. And during the COVID pandemic, we moved to Oshawa. We were going to try something different because everybody was working remote. And we were like, okay, let's try it out. So we bought a house in Oshawa. Shortly thereafter, we realized, well, more me than Kevin because he loved it out there. I just realized we spent so much more time in the city and I wanted to move downtown. Like I just wanted change, but I wanted to move downtown. So it started off with looking for a property to house hack or to, purchase for my daughter to live in until we could renovate or whatever it was. It was really just for our personal use. It wasn't even for investment because we didn't really think what that would look like. We thought it would just be way more capital that we could even complete a project like that. We didn't even research it. We were just like, okay, this is going to be our principal. Right. That was what we were going in looking at that property.
Right. And then while that was happening, changes were happening in the city because it wasn't where it is today. Mm-hmm. And can you maybe kind of just walk us through that? Like Bill 23, and I was obviously, I think, a couple other different bills you talked about.
Yeah, so Bill 23 was a bill from the province of Ontario that's trying to encourage more housing creation. So with that bill, one of the key kind of points in it was to allow for 3 units as of right. So with that bill, it kind of forced all the cities across Ontario to update their zoning bylaw to allow for 3 units in some sort of way, whether it's 3 units in the main house or 2 units in the main house plus 1 detached, garden suite, the different terminology depending on the city.
Yeah. Laneway house.
Yeah, laneway house, garden suite, accessory dwelling, essentially just a detached dwelling unit. But so that's why we're seeing across all cities in Ontario the updates in the zoning bylaw to allow for 3 units. Now, with the federal government, they have the Accelerator Fund, which is encouraging cities to upzone to 4 units as of right. So that's when you hear, the federal government offering, hundreds of millions of dollars for cities to upzone. Ottawa, Mississauga, Toronto, these are some of the cities that have done that, Kitchener, right? So with these changes, whether it's the federal government, provincial government, or they might have been already kind of enacting some of these changes at the same time, you're seeing more cities just upzone, right? So those as of right units. So specifically in Toronto, I feel like this was already a little bit underway, but they've upzoned to allow for 4 units plus 1 as a garden suite or a laneway house. So you can have up to 5 units across the city, no matter what zone or area you're in. So that's
huge.
That's huge, right? So some neighborhoods, we call it the yellow belt. Formerly, you could only have a single family home. Tons of restrictions on that. Now it just unlocks entire neighborhoods to allow for that.
Right. Now, I thought Doug Ford was trying to push back on that a little bit. Did you hear anything about that? Where it's like, hey, do you want that right across the board? Do you want 4 units in like any neighborhood, any street?
Yeah. So the pushback was, with Bill 23, they're allowing 3 units. People started talking, why not just allow 4 units as of right? Like kind of like increase that measure that happened with Bill 23. And that's where Doug Ford's like, okay, we've allowed for 3 units as of right, 4 is too much. And that's where he kind of pushed back against that. But that being said, the federal government really wants to push for 4 units as of right. That's why they have the Accelerator Fund. That's how they're kind of incentivizing cities to update their zoning.
So the Accelerator Fund, who's getting this fund? Am I
the
getting
city.
it? The city. So, okay, so the investor's not getting it.
No.
This is the fund to the city to say, let's implement this so that you have enough, is it resources, power to implement this?
Resources, they can kind of put it towards, like one of the big questions is, how can neighborhoods take on this capacity? Do you need to upgrade infrastructure? There's, with the bill, they also reduce development charges. So, this kind of gives them back some funds that they may have lost otherwise. So it's just, like if the city needs money, it's a way essentially of just kind of paying them to do this.
Right. Almost like a little bribe. But,
yeah. Exactly.
You know what I always thought about as well, too, and especially with all the additional housing that could potentially come out of this. So now you've got like all these neighborhoods that are single family homes that are now going into 3 units or maybe even 4 units. What about plumbing? You got a lot more people flushing toilets now. Like, have they looked into that, or is that not even an issue?
Every time we're upgrading to have more bathrooms, we do need to calculate, do you need to upgrade your water service? So that is a consideration. That goes only on the private side, though. Mm-hmm. How the kind of city infrastructure needs to upgrade if, let's say, the whole neighborhood goes to 4 units.
Yeah.
Like, they haven't really necessarily accounted for that. So that's where, let's say the NIMBYs have some concerns. It's like, can everybody just add 4 units, and then now what does that do to the infrastructure? Do we have the capacity for that?
Yeah,
I personally don't know like how much of a study they have conducted to review that.
Yeah. All right. And what about homes? Like, what type of homes can you do these in? Can this be done in townhomes as well too, or is it semi-detached and detached?
Yeah, detached, semi-detached townhomes. I would say the toughest part with the townhome is, even though they allow it, is, you have fewer walls to add your windows. So it might limit how you're configuring bedrooms, living rooms, because you can imagine townhomes, you share your walls on 2 sides.
Right.
So then you only have front and back windows. So maybe, you have to have your living room on one side and your bedroom on the other, and then that's it. Right. So
yeah, for sure. Because yours was a semi-detached.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what did you end up doing with that? And we'll dive deeper into it, but just at a high level.
So it was a 2.5-story semi-detached home, and we turned it into 4 units. And it's interesting because when we first came to see it, I thought it would be somewhere where we would live, but I think, Victoria, you came out really early to come see it with us, and it was...
I dragged her out.
Victoria and Gary, where you both kind of said, you could get 4 units in here. And then that's all my husband heard, and Kevin's usually the more conservative one. And when he heard 4 units and he was talking about this the whole way home, then I said, oh, okay, we're switching, we're pivoting, and this is going to be what we're going to do with this house.
Yeah, and it's turned out well. It really has, and we'll dive into that for sure. Now, what about for say like investors now that are listening to this and they're looking at like the opportunity at severing lots? That's obviously another big thing that's happening in Toronto as well too. Is there anything new with that, or is that kind of still the same? And where do you see some opportunities there?
Yeah, I would say the process is still the same. I wouldn't say any of these updates in zoning and whatnot changes it. I would say just generally cities want more housing. So I think when you're looking to get a minor variance, so a severance is called a consent application, and it goes to the Committee of Adjustment. This Committee of Adjustment is also the same committee you go to for a minor variance. So if you want to increase your building height or reduce your parking that is required, or anything related to zoning, you go to this committee and you present your kind of proposal, and this is where the community can kind of jump in and say, I like it or I don't like it, and that's what you hear on the news. So in that meeting, it's important to understand, like, what does the city want? So I find because most cities want more housing, it's not that they're more lenient, but they're more willing to understand, like, where are you coming from, what kind of variances are you applying for? And if it's all in the means of creating, say, rental housing, they're more likely to, I feel now, approve these applications. So that's what's helping. Yeah. And then when it comes to, severances, what I like about it is, say you're allowed 3 units as of right. If you sever a property, now you have 3 plus 3, right? So now you have 6 units.
Which is huge.
Which is great, So I think that potentially unlocks other financing opportunities like CMHC, because going from 3 to 6 units, now you're more in commercial financing. You can package that together. You can get really creative in kind of thinking about how you're strategizing and understanding these kind of tools in your tool belt as an investor to think about all the different ways you can unlock value, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's the frontage that you're typically looking for? And is there a depth requirement as well when you're in Toronto, and also zone?
Yeah, it depends on the city. I'd say for Toronto, you could probably get away with, like 2 20-foot lots, even like I've seen even smaller, like under 20-foot lots. So I think it depends on like what you're looking for in terms of like a unit mix. So start thinking like a developer. Do you want 1-bedroom units? Do you want 2-bedroom units? What's ideal? And then thinking about, you could sever like a 40-foot lot and have 2 20-foot lots. But by the time you kind of account for your setbacks and your footprint, you're left with very skinny, tiny units. Do you want to have that kind of development and hold on to it? Me personally, maybe not, but I've seen other clients and investors do that. So if you're open to a smaller building, you could probably sever a 40-foot lot, but more often than not, you're looking at like a 50-foot plus wide lot.
Right. And then wasn't there something also recently that just came out as well too, where now if you're on a main road that you can also develop even more units? Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So one thing that recently passed is called the Major Street Study. So if you're on a major street, think, King, Queen, Eglinton, a major street like that. There's a whole map you can find online as well. You're allowed up to 60 units.
60 units?
60. Yeah, 60 units.
And then how high can you go?
6 stories.
So okay, hold on. But if it's a detached home?
I was going to ask, does it have to be a detached home?
What?
So, I mean, if it's a semi, like, I've seen other buildings where not as high as 6 stories, but they'll do 3 stories attached to a home.
Yeah.
Is that possible?
Well, more often than not, if you're proposing something this big, you're demolishing. You're not really doing a conversion. So, that being said, like say you're allowed 60, but doesn't mean, if you have a small parcel of land, there's no way you're fitting 60.
Right.
But so it depends on like the size of your land and your setbacks and how many units you can actually fit. But, before you'd have to go through a rezone if you wanted 60 units or you wanted 6 stories. So now it's just saying it's allowed to do up to 6 stories, up to 60 units without going through a rezoning process.
That's crazy.
So yeah, that's crazy. Now we're thinking, what that unlocks is like now you need to go to your architect and think about what can we fit in terms of a building size? Can we make the layouts work? Can it fit on the property?
Do you have any clients or investors that are looking at this right now, or
yeah, I'm working on one.
Really?
So we could have built 6 stories, but one thing to think about is once you get to the 4th story, you need to, by building code, put in an elevator. So then that's a huge line item. Now, again, you think of like a developer and, how many units do you need more to kind of justify the cost of this elevator? Like not only the upfront cost, but the ongoing maintenance. So it's not enough to, in my opinion, build a 4-story building. You need to have probably push the 6 stories and get a good number of units.
For it to make sense.
For it to make sense. Otherwise, you should stay with the 3-story. You don't need an elevator at that point and see how many units you can get. So I'm working on a property. It's close to Eglinton, and it's going to be an 8-unit building, 3-story plus basement.
I would love to come check that out.
Yeah.
And what was there before? Was it a detached home?
It was it's like a commercial building. It is on like a residential street, but it's like this funny commercial building. And yeah, it's not a huge lot. I think it's maybe 30 feet by like 100 feet. And I'm trying to squeeze in 8 units, but that will have to get a minor variance, and it's fairly aggressive, so we'll see how that turns out.
Right.
Yeah.
You know what I think also as well too is a lot of people get scared when they hear variance or minor variance, and is the city going to shut down? And I'm sure you've worked with a lot of investors where you've worked with the city, and do a lot of them go through if they're reasonable?
Oh yeah, like I've gone to committee and I've had like 5 neighbors show up and they're all upset, what we're proposing. But more often than not, they're upset about things that you're not applying the variance for. So they're kind of just, they're being heard, but like when it comes to the planners at the city, like they understand like what we're working around, right? So
Right.
I think it depends on what you're applying for when it comes to variance, and the key thing is like doing your research and making sure that there are precedents for the variances that you're applying for. Let's say you're applying to build 11 meters when you're allowed 10 meters. Are there examples of other people being allowed 11 meters? If not, you're putting yourself at risk because you're going to be the precedent setter. And, generally as the developer, you want to do things that are boring, it's been done before, and you can kind of point to that as an example. So that's basically what I'd lean to. Can you point to other examples that are doing what you want to do? And then you can point to that in the committee, and more often than not you'll get it passed. But then also arm yourself with options.
Right.
So if that's your option A, have like a plan B and C that are also acceptable kind of investment paths for you, so that you're well protected.
Right. Yeah. And the other way to arm yourself as well too is use you.
Yeah,
That's a great tool, great resource. Yeah, I'm not going there by myself. So, all right, cool. Listen, I want to move into the next segment, and I want to talk about what it was like working with the city, and obviously some of the mistakes that happened, and whether they're mistakes or even maybe just missing timeline, maybe because of contractors or the city. So let's kind of dive into that. Let's dive into more specifics on your project as well too. So semi-detached, converted into 4 units. What was that like?
So for the most part, it has been pretty seamless. I think the one piece which is still outstanding that we learned has been a little bit of a pain in our side is Toronto Hydro. So the city wanted densification, and I don't think they were speaking to the other parties involved, and so Toronto Hydro wasn't prepared for the influx of these conversions, and we had to upgrade to a 400 amp. So
That's a lot of juice.
that's a lot of juice. But think about it. It's 4 units. They're all, they've got the mini, what are they called?
Mini split,
The
Mini
heat-
split,
heat
yeah,
pumps,
heat
yeah.
pumps.
Heat pumps, okay.
All of
which
the
is
appliances.
cooling and heating.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we should touch on all that stuff as well too. So
Yeah,
heating, okay.
and then the baseboard. So everything is based on the electricity. So based on our engineer's recommendation, we had to go 400 amp. Now, at the beginning, we were actually trying to do 2 times 200 amp. Is that what we were trying to do?
Oh yeah, two separate lines. There are some cities that will allow for that. So you're not running one 400 amp line, which has to be dug underground.
It can't be above ground. Okay.
Can't be above ground. So there are scenarios where cities will allow 200 amp lines, overhead lines, and then that could save on money and timeline. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
why do you have to do 400?
I believe that was, I don't even know.
Yeah. Toronto doesn't really allow that. So I know for sure like Kitchener does. But yeah, Toronto just doesn't operate that way. So they kind of force you to do the 400 amp underground service.
Yep.
And then that kind of unlocked a whole can of worms. Like the difference between a 100 amp or 200 amp service and then jumping to 400 amp, it's not like, oh, this is like another, $5,000 and another couple weeks. It's like you've kind of entered another territory.
Got it. Okay. So we did 4 units. What are the unit sizes and bedrooms in each of these? What did you create out of this semi 2.5 story home?
So we have a split floor plan. So the basement is a 1 bedroom. The main floor is a 1 bedroom. And then the second floor is split into 2. The back of the second floor is a studio, and then the front of the second floor plus the third level is a 1+ den.
So the 1 unit has 2 floors.
Yes.
Right.
Technically 3 because they access from the front of the house.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Okay.
But the living space is the second and third floor.
Okay. Now, in regards to the project, right? Did you guys have to rip it down to the studs?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, down to the studs. We had to improve the sorry, you got
the insulation.
The insulation. Sorry,
Okay.
I was like, what is it called again? The insulation, and yeah, just reconfiguring everything, making sure there's the soundproofing, the fire separation.
Yeah, and the height in the basement was amazing as well too down there.
We got
Yeah.
really lucky because
Yeah.
it was already a good height. We didn't have to do any underpinning, so that was a
Huge.
real advantage.
Yeah, yeah, and we also did property tours in as well there too. And I remember, I think your neighbor actually had to underpin, didn't he?
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So
he said he had to underpin, and it spent a lot of money
Right.
for that. Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
So so now, in regards to timeline, how long did it take from the time you got the keys to where we are now?
So we got the keys end of April, and we anticipated
End of April.
2023.
Okay.
So we anticipated a year, including all of the permitting process and everything. So by the time we got the permits and we started the actual construction, which was September, we were pretty much complete the project by end of April. The only
2024.
piece, yes,
Yeah.
2024.
Yeah.
The only piece that's still outstanding is that 400 amp upgrade,
Right.
and that has also been since September of 2023. So you can imagine it's going on to 10 months now, and I've been following up with the Toronto Hydro to understand when they're going to come and do this final switchover.
Right. And what are they saying?
They have gone
Are they saying anything?
silent. They've ghosted me,
So they
which is
ghosted you.
very annoying. I would rather just, even if you tell me, not that I'd be happy, but even if you tell me it's another 2 months, at least I would know what that expectation is, for marketing the last unit. So it's just frustrating that they've just gone silent.
Right. Is it just a phone call? Is it emails? Is there an office that you can go to?
So I've started with the emails. I've taken over the communication from our master electrician. So I've just taken it over. I have done the email follow-ups, but just before this call, I was telling Victoria I'm going to call him. Like, I'm just going to
Right.
harass.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Nicely.
So there's obviously a little bit of a lengthy delay there.
Yes.
Hopefully that's resolved sooner than later. What else? What was it like working with the city and getting the permits? Was it fairly smooth? Were there some hiccups? Because obviously now with Bill 23 and a lot more investors wanting to move into Toronto, because I've never done Toronto.
Yeah.
Right. Because I was always big on cash flow and did the numbers make sense. But now Toronto makes sense. And I think there's like this golden opportunity right now, especially with the conversion. So what's it been like? Has there been like this huge influx with the city because of this?
I would say like even having gone through a lot of similar applications, that one actually went pretty smoothly in retrospect. Like your plans examiner was pretty responsive, and they wanted a couple things like clarified or kind of updated and sent to them, and then they got to it. Sometimes, dealing with the city, I send them a comment like right away, like I can like show you the emails of like how quick we can respond and say like within 24 hours, and then it sits on their desk for 2 weeks. And then I'm like, playing that game of like calling them every day, like what's going on, and then they don't send a automatic reply, so then it turns out I have to call 411, and then they're on vacation, and then next thing you know they're on a mental health leave, and you're like, my client's waiting months, like put it on another examiner, like, so some of those kind of horror stories happen to people, but
Right. So I think the point there is really just to be on top of it as much as you can.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Is there, looking back though, is there anything that you could have done different to speed it up?
I don't think so. I mean, maybe
I think like if
I don't know.
Yeah, like to think of it that I think one thing would be if you wanted to change your whole mechanical system, like, and just find a way to go 200 amp. But that, I don't know if that's really an option for you. I think that's more of like a conversation of maybe for your next project. So was it that painful going through this 400 amp upgrade that we'll just go with a gas furnace for all 4 units, and we'll try to reduce our load so much that we only needed 200 amp service? Like, there are scenarios where we could find that path, but if you are set on like heat pumps and laundry in every unit, you kind of need what it is what it is.
So
right?
It's like, based on the draw that you're taking from hydro. So I don't recall, but did we take the furnace out or did we keep that in?
We took the furnace out.
Okay, so that's the main reason why you had to go to 400 amp, because then if you maybe kept the furnace in, is that a fair enough assessment?
And then the laundry, like if you did shared laundry versus dedicated laundry, then you don't have 4 dryers. But then that changes how you're thinking about it, like as a rental and the layout. So do you want every tenant to have shared laundry? And
we didn't.
Yes.
Just from the standpoint of the tenant, my daughter is a tenant, my son is a tenant, and one of the things that she's looking for now for her next place, my daughter is looking for in-suite laundry. She said it drives her nuts that she has to go, even if it is in the same building, shared laundry. She likes the convenience. She said, I will pay more. And that's the key. You will get more with the in-suite laundry.
Yeah, and just like a different tenant profile, right? So, if you're looking for maybe to build something more like a luxury kind of unit and attract like a tenant that will treat it well, then they're going to demand in-suite laundry.
Yeah. Any other hiccups during the process, like with your contractors or things that came up during the build or rebuild?
Yes. So I have 2 scenarios. So one, the one time where I chose to do something on my own and not go through Victoria, I was so proud of myself. I sourced the front railings for the front porch.
Okay.
So we had somebody come give us a quote. They did the work, and then the inspector came and said, this is not tall enough. It's supposed to be 41 inches high, and it was 36 inch. It was already higher than what we had before, and it matched everyone else in the neighborhood. But she said, because you are a multiplex, you are more than 1 unit, it has to be 42 inches.
So crazy. So it's a written rule somewhere?
Yeah, it's and then I was showing like the excerpt to Michelle, and she's like, oh my God.
I said, are you sure? I kept doubting the inspector, and I had to go to Victoria, and that was when I realized, why didn't we just run it by her first?
Yeah.
Right. So you actually had to take it down?
We had to replace it.
For a couple inches, yeah.
That is so crazy. So it actually is in that, what would that be, the bylaw?
It's in the building code.
Oh, building code.
If you're a multiplex,
your
handrail needs to be 42 inches. Regular handrails are 36 inches. But as soon as you go to multiplex, even like usually we do the 42 inches high if you're up a certain height, you don't want someone to fall over. Right. So on their porch, they're like, I'd be like, yeah, normally you're right, Michelle. But because we've upgraded to 4 units, now we need 42 inches, no matter how high it is off the ground.
Right.
And I was like, I don't know if this is like a silly building code relic, but you got caught in this like kind of funny in between.
And that's what I want to know. Like, so is it 42 inches because we said so in the building code, or is it because there's different families in there? So they just say, you know what I mean? Like, they're still kids, or whatever the situation is, to protect them from falling over this railing, I guess, right? Or because the porch is a certain height.
Yeah. Like I can't understand the practicality of it, but like if we're thinking in the scenario of we're turning this house into 4 units, it doesn't really make sense.
It doesn't. No. It doesn't, because a kid is a kid.
Yes.
Like that's what the protection is there for, so that a kid doesn't fall over the railing because the porch is a certain height.
Exactly. Yeah.
So then let's have it the same height to protect all kids.
Because you think about it, if you left your railing as is, let's say it was 36 inches, which was by code for a single family home, as soon as you upgraded to a 4 unit, that means you have a railing that doesn't meet code. But it's not like they're going to go and tell you to switch it.
Yeah.
They're just going to let you leave it as is.
We should have waited till after.
Okay, so that was a mistake. What else was there?
Okay, so our HVAC. That was a task and a half. I don't know if there are very few HVAC companies that do the mini split and the ERV or HRV?
HRV, yeah.
HRVs, because we got a lot of different quotes. Victoria helped us with that. And there was either a hefty price tag associated with that or inexperience. We had a couple on our side that just told us flat out they don't do it. So we finally found a company where they had good reviews. I don't think I have not ever worked with them. I know you haven't, right?
Yeah, I got their contact from another investor client. Yeah.
Yeah, and so there were a few things we did wrong with the HVAC. First of all, our contractor he's fast. Like when I say he's fast, he doesn't wait. So we should have had the HVAC roughed in before the drywall went up. But while we were trying to find somebody to do the HVAC, he was just like, oh, don't worry. I will close up the walls. I will do everything, and we'll just rough in the electrical for the mini splits. And so when the HVAC company came in, they did a terrible, I remember my contractor sent me pictures. The HVAC was just on top of the drywall, and it was horrible. And I nearly cried that day. It was just a really stressful time because all the beautiful work was it was gone, and I didn't know what to do. And thankfully, I'm surrounded by a really supportive team. We got Victoria engaged, we got the contractor engaged, and the HVAC company. And the three of them really worked well together to fix it and make sure it looked like a presentable product that I would be proud to have tenants move into.
Right.
But that was a really tough time. And then even afterwards, once our tenants moved in, there were issues with the HVAC system. So we had to call the company back to fix it. And I think they realized that that our experience could not make or break them. But, we're in a small investor circle where reputation matters.
100%, yeah. And so I might be a little confused here. So HVAC for what? I thought we went heat pumps. What am I missing?
Oh, it's for the heat pumps, but they still have I guess some venting out, right? So they're providing fresh air and then return air. So
okay, yeah. So this is not duct work. This is just for the actual heat pump itself.
Yeah, exactly. They're
Got it.
flexible lines, but you could imagine even there's a unit on the wall. They'll have to have, and this let's say the HRV. So the HRV, it's a unit. It's like a little box. It provides fresh air and takes out old air and then kind of takes it out of your building, right? So it's kind of this box. And then out of this box, you'll have some flexible ducts that will kind of supply into some of your rooms, and then it'll kind of pull old air through a duct and then out to the exterior. So
okay, got it. So they were putting them into the rooms as well.
Exactly, yeah.
So there is duct work, minimal. There is.
Okay. I didn't think I knew that. Okay.
So that's an HRV, and then for the actual heat pump ductless units, those only have almost like plumbing lines that come in and out for that fluid that they come in. So those don't really have.
Right, because they just heat up the rooms, essentially, that room.
Exactly,
okay,
yeah.
Got it.
So it's more like the HRVs that had, some duct work, and there's a minimum distance they have to be in front of each other. So there is you could imagine if there's a box in a closet, it's coming out of the closet and then supplying air into a room or your bedroom, living room. So that you could imagine was done after the drywall is coming in. So depending on how clean that technician is, they're just cutting drywall, running new pipes. They see a full finished ceiling, potentially running the pipe wherever they want, not considering how that line is going to get finished. Imagine a box in one corner, drawing a diagonal, and then putting it where they want. You're well, if I'm going to frame a bulkhead there, that's going to be a strange diagonal in my ceiling. That's not going to look good. So that's when you need like your designer on board to be like, no, I don't like the way that's going to look. We need to run it in this particular way. Like that's the coordination that's involved. It's difficult though, right? Because it's a little bit out of order. They're not sure what they're allowed to do. That's where you kind of need, like Michelle was saying, like your contractor, your architect, the client, all on board to be like, I'm okay with this solution from a design point of view, from a cost point of view, and from like construction point of view.
Yeah, because how is it going to run? And you got your joist, and it's got to look good.
Yeah.
When it's all so a lot of different moving pieces. So yeah, I guess you've learned a lot for sure. You've learned a lot. Let's move on to the last segment. Here is cost. Everybody wants to know, like, what are the costs? So let's start with what you bought it for. Then we'll get into like the renos and then like ARV. So what?
So we bought it at 1.2, and our reno costs we were targeting 550, but it went up to 600,000.
Okay.
And then our ARV was 2.1.
So 2.1. And the rental was how much again?
600.
Rental was 600, and then you bought it for 1.2, so you're in for 1.8. So, okay, so 300.
Yeah.
That's not bad. So,
Yeah.
have you done the refinance, or what are you guys planning on doing there?
Yeah, we did our refinance. So,
Okay.
and work with a great mortgage broker, and we did a blended. So, portion of it is a mortgage, and then the other is a HELOC.
Okay, so you obviously have some of your reno costs still in the building, but you still made money on the property.
And we're now in Toronto.
Yes, now you're in Toronto, and so then what's next? Sorry, and hold on, before we get into what's next, what were the things that went over budget?
So definitely the Toronto Hydro.
Yeah.
I think we were anticipating like 10K, and then it really ended up being 30, 40.
Yeah, it's a big difference.
It's a big difference.
Yeah.
And just as comparison, a 200 amp upgrade should probably be like 5.
What's that?
5?
5,000.
Yeah, like for your new panel, maybe
Right.
paying for Toronto Hydro.
So if you were to do 200, then you're looking at around 10.
Yeah, but Toronto just
They
doesn't
don't
allow for
even
that.
do that anyway, so you
Yeah.
didn't have that option, right? Looking back, would you have stuck with a furnace to
No.
stay out of that? You wouldn't have.
I think we like the fact that everybody has their own climate control. And then I still think if we accounted for the minimal duct work properly, it would have been fine. And then just, again, for me, it's just knowing what that timeline looks like. So if I knew going in that they would take this long, then I could just prepare myself mentally.
Yeah, for sure.
I think that was the hardest thing.
Okay. And now in regards to rents, what are you getting for rents? Is this thing fully rented yet?
So we have 3 of the units occupied. So 2 of the units are rented, one at $2,900 and the other one at $2,800.
Wow.
And then
Those are good numbers.
we're keeping the studio for ourselves.
Okay.
So it's a flexible space. We're going to short-term rental / use it for ourselves to
Okay.
stay in the city.
And then that's the unit that's in the back, right? So you get
Back
the stairs.
second floor.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, the exterior
Yeah.
stairs.
Yeah.
And then we're just waiting for that basement to close up the wall once the 400 panel upgrade is complete.
Got it. And then what are you anticipating that you're going to get for rents in that lower unit?
We're going to try for 26, but it'll probably be around 24 to 26, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
It's great rents.
Yeah, for sure. And so then based on all of that, are you cash flowing? Are you in a good...
We're in a good place. I wouldn't say we're cash flowing a buttload of money, but we are breaking even. And it was just such a solid investment, and now we're in the Toronto market. I think that's what we're focused on, and it's a long-term gain, right?
Right.
It's also building for children, for their future, that they have an option to live in when they're ready.
Yeah. You're in a great neighborhood. You're in Toronto.
Yeah.
They fully renovated it. Like, I think you went above and beyond most investors, so it's really like a property that you'll like hold on forever, I think.
Yeah.
That's one thing my contractor would question us sometimes on our decisions. He would say, well, it's just a rental.
Yeah.
And I would tell him, every product that we produce, it has to be somewhere where I would see myself living or my children living.
Right.
That's how I do it. Maybe it's wrong, but that's how I do it. So I think of the little extras. Kevin calms me down, though, sometimes, because I wanted to, go to the nines, and he kind of brings me back down to earth. But
Right.
I still like to have a good product in the end.
Mm-hmm. So what's next? Are you going to do another Toronto project?
I am.
Really?
We're ready.
Awesome. Okay.
We're itching
So,
to go.
so then what's kind of holding you back right now? Is it just to finish this project,
Yes.
get the that 400 amp into the property?
Yeah, I just
Okay.
really want to finish this before I move on to the next. Like, my brain capacity, my mental health can only take one project at a time.
Right. Fair enough.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Well, I hope we're there to help you along the way.
Yes.
And then what about you, Victoria? What's kind of next for you?
Yeah, like I think I'm looking at moving more into development. I think a 10 unit or less property, I think Toronto makes sense. Probably combining with a severance strategy. So whether it's like 2 fourplexes plus garden suites, 10 units, or maybe a small apartment if it's like a sizable lot. Yeah, definitely look at those opportunities. And yeah, Toronto, I think, has a lot of potential. So I am looking in Toronto.
I agree 100%. Like I said before, like I've been in Durham region, I've gone out to Curtis and Bowmanville and Newcastle, then we moved out to Peterborough. And for the first time, I'm now looking at Toronto. Well, it's been like, a year and change now, because it just makes sense. And I think that 10 years from now, you'll look back and you're like, man, thank God we got to Toronto. I think it's the way I look at it as well, too, and I've said this also as well, is that nobody would ever go to Manhattan and say, this is unfair. Oh, come, I can't buy in Manhattan. You just missed a boat. And I think this boat right now in Toronto is moving and it's going, and it'll be gone. And I think right now is like some great opportunity, especially with the changes to the bylaws that they've put in.
I agree. Yeah, and I think of it in a way that right now, I think people don't even see the potential, like with 4-unit properties, 5-unit properties. Like, we in the investor community might be familiar with it, but if you go on the market, there's lots of people that are still looking at it as a single family home, at most a duplex. But really the value is in the fourplex, right? Like, if everybody did a project like Michelle in that neighborhood, increase it to 4 units, like, everybody's property value is going up. So if anything, like, the valuation you got right now is probably on the low end. But when people start really doing this, like, everybody's value is going up. Think about like buying a single family home near a condo. Like, naturally you're just going to pull that appreciation because of that density that's being built. So if people moving into the fourplexes, the small apartment buildings now in Toronto, while it's just starting, you're going to get that natural appreciation while everybody begins to do it and is lagging behind.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And it also is going to address the multi-generational families as well, too, where, a brother or a sister on their own can't buy a home, but now they can do it together with mom and dad and, auntie and whoever, and now they're all living in the same home together, but they're separate. So totally. I think it definitely addresses a bunch of different issues that we're facing in the GTA. So Michelle, Victoria, thank you guys very much for your time. Thanks for all the insights. Thanks for sharing the mistakes and the pitfalls that you've gone through, and I appreciate it. I think people would appreciate this because I think we did a good job at just being transparent about what it's like to go through it. However, even though with the mistakes, I still think that there's lots of great opportunity and that you should still move forward with it. Right?
Yeah. The key is like having, a team and kind of pushing past it, and just finishing the project, and you'll bring those learning lessons to the next one.
100%. Yeah. If anyone wants to get a hold of you, Michelle or Victoria, how do they do that?
My Instagram handle is My Design Diaries.
Awesome.
Yeah, my Instagram is BuildXLab, or you can find us on our website, buildxdesign.ca, And yeah, reach out for any help on architecture, or if you're interested in an investment into a multiplex. Happy to have those chats.
Awesome. Thank you guys very much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you for having
All right,
us.
we'll do it
Thanks,
again.
Gary.
We'll do it again.
All right. Bye.
Okay, take care.